given that it's technically an international crowd right now. So let's be respectful and mindful with what we're saying. Be thoughtful as well. So if you have anything that you want to talk about, we can have a discussion later. And hopefully it's something that's going to be helpful for everyone. Also, be cool. This is a casual session. So hopefully everyone of you guys are chill with whatever you're doing. So yeah, if you want to check out the basis of what the stuff that we've shared here, please check out the Figma Code of Conduct, which is figma.com/code of conduct, code dash of dash conduct. So you can check out the things that are happening here. So okay, I just want to officially thank everyone for being here, and huge shout out for those who are attending as well from other countries. I think we have a couple of participants who RSVP'd in this event. So yeah, since this is like the first time that we're gonna be hosting a meetup apart from our traditional Zoom calls here in Bevy, so I'm hoping that this first event would do good. So yeah, just want to introduce us for a little bit, the group. So if a few weeks ago, it was still Figma Philippines, but since the community wanted to like push for more engagement in terms of Figma as a whole, we have rebranded Figma, the community of Figma from Figma Philippines to Friends of Figma Philippines. And it's actually a brand that is aligned to the global brand of Friends of Figma, which is like the community brand for Figma. Okay, one shot for every word that I say, Figma. Okay. Just before we go to the actual program, can we like give a huge shout out to Miramark and like just want to share, just want to share like the inspiration for the logo because this is very cool implementation of the logo. So go ahead, Miramark.
Hi guys,
Hello?
can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yun. Yeah. Good evening, good morning, everyone. So coming from the explanation from Jelbin. So basically, the idea behind our community logo is mostly inspired uh, from our representation for our country. So we put the 3 stars in the sun there, which is very much iconic in terms of like saying Filipino, and then you can easily like visualize everything. Okay, the flag, the 3 stars representing Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, which is the regions consists of the Philippines. And then we also add the jeepney. So as we know it, jeepney is one of the iconic public common transportation within the Philippines. And this is somehow to represent and to show that we as community in the Philippines are inclusive, open, and we're fun, kind of say it. And we are open, and we're just here to learn and share. So as we know, riding jeepney is very common within us, within the Philippines, and there's a lot of kind of different variations of attitudes, personalities that you can uh, kind of meet within the ride. So we wanted to put that iconic jeepney to represent that within the community. That's actually it. Yeah, it's very
Cool.
straightforward.
That's awesome. I was about to cuss. I apologize. Oh, that's pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome. So it's a pretty cool representation of the logo, and it has all of the elements that we have. And hopefully, this kind of solidifies our brand as Figma Philippines and Friends of Figma Philippines, rather. So yeah, huge thanks to Miramark for that. To quickly move on, and I know that everybody is excited um, to learn about the topic for tonight. So just a quick introduction. So the session tonight for Figma Fridays. I'm sorry if you've heard that crash. A cat just fell. Anyway, going back. So the topic for tonight's Figma Fridays is animating your Figma designs using Principle. So it's a combination of both tools, and I hope that both of you, and I hope that all of you know both of the tools so that you can utilize and learn something from this session. And the person who is going to be sharing Figma, the person who's going to be sharing like the animating of the Figma designs to Principle is Nico Encarnacion. Yeah, Nico Encarnacion, who is yes, was a UX manager at Make Technology. And I'm not gonna go through the formal introduction. Let's just say that Nico is one of the most awesome designers out there in the industry. He started out as an illustrator actually, and then transitioned to front end design and development, and eventually leading like a huge team of designers currently at Make. I was one of those people who have was blessed to work with him like for 2 years, and that was a pretty awesome experience. So yeah, huge shout out to Nico. I'm gonna be passing on the mic to him. Clap, 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 clap. Okay.
Yes,
Take it away,
sir.
Nico. Take it away.
Grabe. Anyway, okay. Hello everyone. Let me share my screen. So, hello. So thanks, Jobs, for that short but sweet introduction. So I'm Nico Encarnacion, and like what Jelvin mentioned, I'm currently UX manager at Make Technology. Just for everyone's background, Make is a digital design agency. We work with a very diverse set of clients like Cebu Pacific, Junior NBA Asia, Starbucks Asia Pacific. So we've touched a lot of industries, so to speak, from financial technology to airlines to food and beverage. Um, so right now at Make, yeah, as I mentioned, I'm the UX manager, and currently I'm also leading the interaction design team, where we create wireframes for websites, for mobile applications, web applications, and my favorite part actually is creating prototypes. Creating prototypes for client presentations, for usability testing, and that's what I'm going to talk about um, tonight. So, just a background, right? What this workshop isn't. So, this is not going to be a workshop about user interface design. So, I'm not going to teach you about 8-pixel grids. I'm not going to teach you how to make components in Figma. I'm not going to teach you how to fix your typography. All of those things deserve a separate session. This is also not going to be a workshop about um, designing or creating prototypes or basic prototyping using Principle. There's Principle is a very um, it's a very complex tool for prototyping. There's so much to learn about Principle that we won't be able to fit it in this 2-hour session. Um, so for the next 1 hour and 45 minutes, I want everyone to chill. So this is going to be a very chill session, just like what Jelvin said earlier. So grab a cup of coffee or a glass of whiskey or beer, so whatever makes you wake up this late in the evening, or grab some chips. I have some chips here beside me. So tonight is, I hope, going to be awesome for everyone. Okay, so moving on, Figma and Principle. Why use two different tools for creating prototypes or for designing, right? So when we at Make, at least when we visualize interactions on a page, we always use prototypes. We never present just pictures or JPEGs to clients or developers whenever we're describing different animations or different interactions. So as much as possible, we present these things in the form of prototypes or moving images. Like what they always say, if images are worth 1,000 words, prototypes are worth 1,000 meetings. Believe it or not, we've had clients or projects before where presenting prototypes instead of JPEGs saved us around 2 to 3 hours of meeting time. So that's a lot of time saved um, for someone who's working in an agency, right? So why two tools? Figma. Let's start with Figma. Figma's Figma has grown a lot. Figma is very different now compared to when I first used it back in 2017 or 2016. Back then, it was just a design tool. Um, I was using Sketch most of the time. And these past couple of years, prototyping has been introduced to Figma, and just this year, it has been improved a lot. So a lot of animations were integrated. There are already different transitions that you can use for your components, for your pages. So it has improved a lot. But the problem that we have with Figma is since the lockdown started, right? So we we've been presenting to clients through videos, through video conference, video calls. So what we noticed whenever we presented prototypes using Figma is it's kind of laggy whenever we are sharing our screens to clients or to other members of the team. So we resorted to recording our screens so that we can send them to clients and to developers or to everyone we work with. But the screen recordings were also laggy, so there's really no other way to send your animations or prototypes to developers without sharing the actual files, which which is sometimes not practical because they find it hard, especially clients. They find it hard to figure out how to interact with Figma. I'm referring to the more old school clients that we work with. So in order to make things easier for them, we send them videos that describes how this button is going to behave whenever a user hovers on it, how this carousel is going to animate. Okay. So in terms of prototyping, at least for our requirements, Figma is not there yet. Hopefully, in the next couple of months, within the year, they can improve their prototyping function even more. But for now, we are using Principle for smoother animations. So using Principle allows you to present smoother animations even when you are sharing your screen, and it allows you to easily record your animations for the entire team. And these recordings can be exported in the form of MOV files, GIFs, and other formats that are needed by developers, and even in different resolutions depending on your Wi-Fi internet speed or something. Okay, so what we're going to design tonight is this. All right, so this is a design that I quickly put together earlier today, actually. Okay, so this is a mock-up of Porsche's web design. So just a disclaimer: we're not working with Porsche. Porsche is not Mick's client. I sure wish they are, but the design here that I presented, that I created, is made for animation. So the content is going to be totally random. And I created this design, like I mentioned just a few hours ago, just to simulate situations where it's really just your first time to encounter some components for animation, for exporting. So another disclaimer, I will be making a few mistakes along the way in the next 1 hour and 10 minutes. So just bear with me, because just like everyone else here, it's going to be my first time to animate this design. All right. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to leave this design as is. Okay. And I'm going to try to import it to I'm going to try to import it to Principle. Okay. Right. Okay, so this is Principle. Okay, so we have a blank project right now. And let's go back to Figma, select this page, go back to Principle. And the awesome thing about Principle is it lets you easily import layers from Figma. So just select the document that we want, getting documents, okay? Then it can you can actually import your currently selected frame so that you won't have to import everything else, okay? Okay, so this is my first time. Okay, oh, that's surprising. 101 images. Believe it or not, for some designs, this could reach up to around 300 images. Okay, so this is clearly not optimized for animation. So 100 images is a lot for a one-page design because you're not going to animate 100 elements in a design anyway. Okay, so this is our design in Principle. And when I click the layers panel here on the left side, we're going to see a pretty disorganized layer structure. Okay, so everything's a mess. Okay, so the icons are not flattened. There's tons of layering here that I don't need for animation. Okay, let's check out this section for the history. Oh man. Okay, so there's a lot of nesting, which we don't want when we're going to animate prototypes or when we're going to build prototypes, because this complicates things for you. Okay, so this is something that we want to avoid, and this is what I want to teach you tonight. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to optimize this workflow from Figma to Principle. Okay, so what this workshop is about. It's going to be about the best practices for preparing your design or designing in Figma with animating or prototyping in Principle in mind. Okay, so what I want you folks to learn tonight is to build a set of habits that you can develop so that in the future it will be very easy for you to design in Figma with the prototyping in mind for Principle. So um, with this workflow, you will find it very easy to look for the layers that you want to animate or make a little bit interactive in Principle, so that when you get to this tool, you know exactly what you're looking for and you know exactly what you want to animate. All right. So let's undo everything and let's go back to Figma. Okay, so the first thing that we usually do when we prepare our prototypes for Figma or for Principle is we create a separate page for the prototype. Okay, so if you're fond of using a lot of components for your Principle designs, which we should, so I that's something that you need to break here. So we need to detach all of our components in this prototype page. Okay, so because we're going to be customizing some of the components here for different states, for different scenes, things like that. So we are currently in the prototype, right? Okay, so always separate your file in a prototyping page. So next is you should identify all of the scenes or main scenes of your prototype. So scan all of your sections of your design. So for example, for this hero section, what are the possible scenes here? Okay, so always think what the client or what developers are going to ask you. And these things most of the time are what happens when I click this, or what happens when I scroll to the right, or what happens when I slide to the right or to the left. Okay, so you should prepare for all of those scenarios. So, for example, for this hero section, you can have a scenario where the hero image is different, the uh, hero text is also different, as well as the subheading. There could also be a scene or state here where the user hovers on the car models, model navigation link on the navigation bar. Okay, so you should provide that here, right? For the next section, so nothing special is going to happen here. For this one, we may want this scene to have a different car when users click on a right button or something, or when they swipe to the left or to the right. Okay, so just prepare. You should prepare for things like that. So I prepared another image here of the car. For the next few slides, or for the next few sections, these are pretty straightforward. For the history or for the milestone of Porsche, so this can be slide 1, this can be slide 2, and this can be slide 3, right? And the next section is basically just a carousel, so no need for special states here or special scenes. Shopping tools, very straightforward, and the footer. All right. So far, those are the main scenes of the different sections of our website. For the carousel, or for the hero section, for the milestones, and for the featured car models. Okay. So next, the next part of this discussion will be like the meat of tonight's workshop. So it's I want everyone to take note of four things whenever you're preparing files. Okay, for whenever you're preparing Figma files for prototyping. So number one, while you're here in Figma, identify the different animations that you want for each layer, for each scene, for each component. Okay, and number two, flatten and rename all those layers that you want to be animated. So I want you to simplify all of those layers, and take note, no two layers should have the same name. Okay, so they can have the same name structure, and you can add different numbers at the end as a just as an identifier or modifier. But take note, no two components or no two layers should have the same name, right? So even your backgrounds, even your buttons, even your headings should have different layer names. Number three, always prepare states as early as now while you're in Figma. Prepare all of the states for your components, for your sections. So that's what we did here for our sections. And use as little nesting as possible. So nesting can be minimized by using flattening trick that I will teach you later. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so first, let's identify all of the layers that we're going to animate. Okay, so first, this nav bar. Okay, so what do we want to happen here in the nav bar? Okay, so the nav bar is going to have two states. So this default state, where the user doesn't is not hovering on any of the links, and this active state, where the cars, the different models are visible. Okay, so what we want to do here is, I always arrange the layers in my prototypes according to how they are arranged on the screen itself. So I'm going to put the main navigation layer at the top part of our hero page. And So what are the things that we don't need here? Okay, so this utility bar, this top part that contains links for download, price list, book a test drive, login and register, we're actually not going to animate that. So let's go ahead and group that. Let's call it utility bar. And this is the how you flatten layers in Principle. The Principle, add Principle, flatten at the end of the layer. So when you export this to Principle, this is going to be one layer. You're not going to see all of these sub layers anymore. Okay. The logo, let's name that the Porsche logo. Main navigation. The main navigation is going to be the one is the one that's going to have two states. All right. So let's copy the active state here. And place it here. Okay. So it's on top. It's on top of the other main navigation. And let's rename this. So navigation, active, Principle flatten, and main navigation, default, Principle flatten. Right? So we have two states for the navigation. Let's hide this. And what else do we need from here? So this section. So let's copy that and place it inside the main navigation component. Let's call this, let's group this as models dropdown. And frame one, we want this to be some sort of carousel later on in the prototype. Okay, so what the developers usually ask us whenever we present them with designs like this is, okay, what happens when the screen is smaller? So are the cars here going to be compressed, or are they going to scroll from the left to right? So that's what we're going to do here. Okay, so we don't want the cars to reach the edges of the screen. We want them to have to disappear somewhere here. So the trick there is using a white gradient. Okay. Oh, where is it? Let's use a white gradient that will cover any car that goes beyond this point. Okay. And let's use a linear gradient. Make it white. Adjust the colors. And duplicate that. Put the same layer the right side and just rotate it. Okay, so let's rename this. I can rename this left gradient and this one right gradient. Okay, this one should be car or model carousel. This one should be the background. The model carousel, let's not put any interactions here. So the model carousel will be a flattened layer. Okay, that's it for the main navigation. Okay, so it's okay. It's okay to leave it like that. Anyway, we're going to transfer everything to Principle later on. What else do we need? So we're going to have another state for the hero image. So let's copy this, place it on top of this hero image. Okay, so hero 2, this is hero 1, this is hero text 1, And let's copy this here. Call this hero text 2. Okay. So let's make sure everything we need in the hero is here. So we have the main navigation and the different states. Okay. We have the hero text 2, hero text 1. These rectangle gradients are actually gradient. Very important. Bottom gradient. All right. So it's clean. We now have a cleaner layer or a group for the hero. Let's make this a frame. Okay. That's it. So we don't need, actually we don't need these things anymore. We can delete that. For the next section, what do we want here? I can imagine an animation here where this part, the shaping the future of sports car, gently animates from the bottom, moving up once the user starts scrolling down. So we need this to be a separate layer. We don't want this flattened with the rest of the layers on this section. So let's call it intro heading or intro heading. For this layer, all right, we want this separate from the button as well. So let's make this description layer. And for the button, we need to think of the interaction here. What do we want the button to look like when users hover on it? Okay, so let's make it simple. Let's make the colors inverted. So let's add a fill and let's make the text white. Okay, so this is a duplicated layer. So button on hover, button default. Okay, so we have two states for our buttons, and let's group this into button component. Let's make this a frame. Just take note, as much as possible, use frames for things that you are going to animate later in Principle, because sometimes Principle tends to flatten some group layers, right? For this one, background intro, right? For this part here, the featured, let's call this featured cars section, featured cars section. Okay, what do we want to happen here? So we also want this text group to animate in from the bottom. Okay, so as the user scrolls down the page, I want this to sneak up from 0% opacity to fully visible. Okay, so let's just move it down a little bit, and okay, let's make this featured cars each group. I don't want to flatten this because there's another button here, and this button should also have a fill or another state. So, all right, so button white. See what I did there? So I'm not because I already have a button name somewhere in the previous sections. I'm not using the same name for my button because this is a totally different button type. So button white on hover. This is button white default. Right, and let's group this white button component. Make that a frame. Okay, so that's the white button. This one, we can flatten this. H group featured. Okay, now, when you're using longer and longer names for your layers, you can actually use shortcuts. So F, F cars H group. principle. Okay. All right. That's it. I also want to have two cars later on that I can select. So let's place it here, exactly where the other car with the first car is. Okay. Let's name that car 2 or F car 2. This one is F car 1. In this group, okay, so the two models that we are featuring here are the Cayenne and the Cayenne Coupe models. So I also want two different um, highlight components for each of the cars. So let's call this Cayenne highlights. Okay, let's make this interesting. Okay, what I want for this section is when users select a different car, this is going to be a carousel. So when users switch from one car to the next, I can imagine the animation here to be like this. So instead of just moving up, instead of all of the details here moving up together, I want each of these details to animate individually. Okay, so the horsepower detail is going to animate separately, HP1. The acceleration is also going to be different. So acceleration, oops, AC1, and the average speed. Yeah, I think this is the top speed. Sorry, top speed also different. Top speed 1, 9, line 1, 1, line 1.2, line title. Right. Next, let's duplicate this. And for this one, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename all of these things. I'm going to look for all of the ones, replace it with 2. There you have it. You have you have different titles, or you have different layer names for this entire section. Okay, so we have highlights for the coup. We have highlights for the Kain. So I'm excited to animate that later. I haven't tried that yet, so forgive me if I commit mistakes later on. Okay, so the rest of the sections here are going to be pretty easy. Let's try to finish polishing these in around 5 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes. Okay, so for these next two sections, again, I'm thinking of the interaction as the user scrolls down, right? Because we've already thought about the interactions for the two buttons here. So no need to create separate layers for that anymore. So let's just delete those buttons because we already have the same components up there in the previous sections. So we're just going to copy and paste that later in Principle. This one, we can actually flatten this. So what section is this? Our hands, Principle flatten. This is our hands photo. Wow, we have a spacer. Okay, just a neat trick that I want to share to everyone. We actually use spacers for all of our pages in Figma. So this allows us to dynamically adjust spaces between individual elements, or between sections on the same page. So actually, our entire page has auto layout. So let's just remove that so that I can safely remove the spacers. We don't want the spacers to be imported. Okay, so they're all there actually on the right side. So same here. Every detail. See, the thing here is just to keep moving, to keep renaming layers as you go down a page, as you move down a page. Just think of the different interactions that you want to happen for those layers. Every detail, principle, pattern, text. Every detail, text. We don't need principal pattern here. So this is every detail section. This is our hands section. Okay, so what I want to happen for these two sections is as the user scrolls down, these images are going to slide in from the left. Okay, as they scroll down from 0% opacity, they're going to slide in very slowly. They're going to stop once the section is at the center of the screen. So the same with this the same with this image here. I want that to slide in from the right. For the text, let's make it different. So let's make it slide in from the bottom of the screen. Okay, we're going to add a button to that later. All right, so clean layers. Let's go. Next, for the milestones. Okay, so for the milestones, I created two other states. So what we're going to do actually is just group these things here, group that, cut, and paste it here. Oops. Oh. So, right. Sorry. So, mistake. I should fix this layer first. I should fix this section first. So, what do we need to fix here? So, this is the background. This is the shadow. And the timeline, basically, we don't want this to animate. So, the timeline can be a flattened layer. Okay. And 1946, the year, let's keep it as is. And shadow, okay. Arrow left. Okay, this is right arrow. This is the left arrow. And the heading, this one, the image, and this background should be in the same group. So let's name this milestone slide 1. Okay. And slide 1. Okay, everything's renamed. Good, clean, love it. Okay, so next we paste the group from the previous section. Slide 2. Let's put it down here. And this one, let's cut that and paste it here. Nope. Okay, so slide 3. Okay, so we have slide 1, slide 2, and slide 3, all on the same group. Okay, so this is the map. Porsche. So that's okay. This one is pretty straightforward. Each group. Oh, nope. Looking. Each group. Looking. Background. And another carousel. Okay, so we want this flattened also. So looking, carousel, principal flatten. And we also want the same effect here that we have on the navigation. So let's copy these two layers, the gradients, and let's paste them here. Perfect. All right, and let's just move it a little bit to the right and make it softer, I guess. We don't want it to be very hard or sharp gradient. Something like that. Let's see how it looks. Okay. Let's copy the style and paste it here so that you don't have to duplicate the layer anymore. So let's rename this to looking right gradient and this to looking left gradient. All right. So the layer names don't make sense, but as long as they are different, as long as you know what they are when when you get the principle, that's okay. The entire footer will be flattened also. Okay, and the shopping tools as well. So we don't want to animate that. Right. So what do we have? Okay, so that took us around 30 minutes. Okay, so it took us around 30 minutes to clean up a page and prepare them or prepare our layers for prototyping. So what have we done so far? Let's delete these things. So we now have a cleaner page. So we have our hero section at the top. Actually, we want the main navigation to be outside the hero section. So we have the hero section. We have next the intro section and the featured cars section and the about sections here. Why are you there? The about sections, every detail and on hands should be here. Footer should be down there, as well as the shopping tools. Milestones should be before explore. All right, so clean, super clean layers. Everything that we have flattened are those layers that we don't want to animate later on. Okay. And one thing that we also did here is we identified all of the interactions that we want to happen in Principle. Now, let's go to Principle. Okay. So, wait, I'll first select this. So, home page. I'll select this page in Figma. I'll go to File, Import from Figma, and just wait for it. Okay, if this is the correct file, yes, and import selected frames. Now let's see how many images are we importing. 61 images. So that's a big improvement from the 100 images that we imported earlier. That's 40 images less. So that's a very big improvement. Not to mention big savings on the file size later on. Okay, so we are here in Principle. Let's say first. We are here in Principle. And um, the question that comes into mind of a lot of designers whenever they encounter a prototyping tool for the first time or whenever they import their files for the first time is what to animate first, right? So where do we start here? We have 41 images or we have 61 images ready to be animated. Where do we start? Okay, so the way we do it at Make is we start with the smallest components. Okay, so we start with the micro interactions. So if you're familiar with atomic design, you can approach it that way. But before I start animating, let me just take a sip of my drink here.
Yeah,
Right.
go ahead.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions if you don't mind, Nico.
All right, sure. What is it?
I already answered it a while ago, but the question is, uh, just a summary. Like, why do you want to flatten, and why do you want to keep it in frames? Like, when do you decide to keep frames?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So for example, here, if you remember earlier, I flattened this layer, this download price, this utility navigation with the download price list, book a test drive, yada yada. I flattened this because I'm not planning to animate any of those things inside this component, right? So I'm not going to add different states for these links. This is just going to be just another flat layer in this prototype. Okay, and for example, another example is, for example, these numbers. Okay, I flattened this because, oh no, actually it's not flattened. I forgot to flatten it, but that's okay. Okay, this one, I flattened this layer because I'm not going to move these two layers separately. Okay, so I'm only planning to animate this as one element. So there's no need for them to be two separate layers. That lessens the complexity of the layers that you have here in Figma. So in Principle. So if you take a look at the layer structure of the every detail section here on the left side, we only have two layers, and that makes it so much easier for us to identify what we need to animate in this section, and it allows us to just easily select the layers that we need to add interactions to. Okay, so just a rule of thumb, if you're not planning on animating anything inside of that component, flatten it.
Cool.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. Any other questions before we move to prototyping? Chips.
Just Justin has a question. Is there a way to paste the elements where the cursor is? This is on Figma. Do you have any? Is there one by Anjo? I usually just copy paste it.
Currently, no. It's only pasting where your screen is and the layer selected, depending on certain conditions. I can share a helps article about this.
You can paste the element on the top left if you command or control shift V. But that's the closest thing. Like it wouldn't be where the cursor is, but on the frame, within the frame. Yeah.
Yeah, better answer.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Chi and Jobs and Anjo. I'm really bad with shortcuts, to be honest. I find it very hard to remember shortcuts in design tools. So I used to have this wallpaper on my laptop that lists down all of the shortcuts in Figma, all of the shortcuts in this tool, in that tool. Anyway, but shortcuts are very helpful. Thanks for that. Thanks for sharing, guys. All right. So let's take things easy. Let's start with the components first, okay? So, wait, before I proceed. So start with the components first. Start with the smallest interactions. Next, you'd want to proceed to the sections, to animate the interactions for the sections. So these are the carousels, these are the sliders, the big animations. And lastly, save the animations for entire pages for the last part. Okay, so these are what you call the drivers and flows for when you're doing prototypes in Principle. So for those who are seeing Principle for the first time, don't get intimidated. If you've encountered other tools before, like Adobe Premiere, like Flash, sobrang old school, like other animation tools, it's very, very straightforward, as you will see later on. Okay, so let's start with what's the smallest component that we can work on. Okay, so this one, the buttons. Okay, so Figma or Principle actually allows you to create create components. So I'll just select this layer, this folder, and press this create button, the create component button at the top left side of the screen. And when you press that, ta-da, you have a component. So this is the initial state of our component, of our button. Just make sure. So this is the hover state. So let's hide this for a while. Okay. And this is the default state. So in order for us to make another state, we just need to duplicate this layer, and that's going to be automatically placed on the right side of the current layer. Then what we want to do on this duplicate layer is just make the active state appear. So 100% opacity for this previous state. Let's make it 0% opacity. Okay. Okay. So when we transfer, when we shift from one state to another, you will see the preview here on the top right corner, also animating. So how do we add interactions? So we want users to hover on this first state, on this default state, hover inside. And when they hover on that, that's going to take them to this next state. Okay, so let's try. Good, perfect. But it's not going back to the previous state. So we need another interaction from this frame. When they hover outside of this button, the state is going to go back to the default state. All right, you guys get it? So default state, user hovers, active state. User hovers out, goes back to default state. So when we try it here, perfect. Okay, so back to parent. We're not going to see it yet here because it's too small. It's too small in the preview because we haven't set up our entire page yet, but we'll get to that later on. Okay, so that's it for our ghost or our white ghost button. What about for our dark ghost button here? So let's create a component also. Create it here. This is actually the active state. So what I want to do is just make this disappear here. Add the same interactions, hover inside, goes to next state, select the next state. When you hover outside, it goes back to the default state. Pretty straightforward, right? So there you go. So there, perfect. Just close that, go back here. Next, what else? Okay, let's go back to the top. Let's work on the bigger components. So one of the bigger components is the main navigation. So let's create a component for the main navigation. So there are two states also for the main navigation that we prepared. Let's ungroup this for a second. Okay, so the first state is the one without the drop down here. Okay, so let's make the drop down this transparent in this state. Okay, and let's duplicate this state, this frame. And for this frame, we want the utility or the navigation. Oh no, wait. This is what I've been telling you guys. Ah, okay. All right. So one thing to be careful about when importing files into Figma is you don't want to hide, you don't want to leave hidden elements here in Figma because those won't be imported to Principle. So what should we do here? So what I usually do for stuff like that is I'm going to duplicate this layer. Okay, because the thing about Principle also is all of your pages, all of the pages in a flow should have the same size. Okay, so for example, I am inside my main navigation component, and the size of my screens here are 1280 by 120 pixels. Okay, so whenever I import another page inside this component, it should also be 1280 by 246 246 pixels. Okay, so that's why I'm duplicating this frame here. I'm going to remove all of the stuff that I don't need or I've already imported. Then I'm going to show this navigation item, this active state of our navigation. Then I'll just select this, go back to Principle, click File, Import from Figma, and import that currently selected frame. And that what's that going to do is it's going to paste that on the right side of our flow. And there you have it. Only this frame or only this layer is imported. So it's safe for us to copy this and paste it here. All right. Delete that. Now, we also want this layer to be present in the previous screen, but at 0% opacity. Okay. And in this state, it's kind of messed up because you can still see the default state at the back. So let's remove that. Okay. Or let's make that transparent by setting it to 0% opacity. Okay. So what's the effect? All right. So when we shift from this state, from this state to the next, so that's going to animate. Okay, perfect. So the only thing left for us is to add the actual interaction trigger. So we want users to hover on, all right, let's make them hover on the entire main navigation so that it's safer. So then when they hover inside, that's going to take them to the next state. And when they hover outside of the main navigation, that's going to take them to the previous state. Pretty straightforward. Hover in, hover out, hover in, hover out. Okay. Next, we also want the carousel to appear here. So models dropdown should be 100%. Okay, let's try that. Perfect. Okay, but we want it to be more interactive. Okay, we just don't want it to appear all of a sudden, right? So we want it to slightly move from the top. And we can do that by moving it to the bottom of the page of the layers panel. And in this first state, let's just move it slightly to the top, maybe 10 pixels, something like that. Okay. All right. And what's missing here in the second state is the white background for the main navigation. So we can just create a background here. I forgot to put this in Figma. This should be in Figma. And we'll just make this white. Nav BG, copy that, paste it here, make it transparent. Okay, now let's see. Okay. Now you're seeing that weird line between the main navigation and the drop down, the models drop down, right? So we don't want that to happen. That's happening because their transparencies are animating at the same time. So where there's this more transparent section in the middle where the two layers are meeting. So what we want to happen is we want one of the layers animation to be slightly delayed so that they don't meet in that awkward space. So we want this models drop down to be slightly delayed. So what we want to do is select that here in the timeline, okay? Then just move the models drop down animation up to when the nav background stops animating, okay? So let's try that. Perfect. Okay, so the same when it goes back to the previous state. Let's move it back a bit. Oh no, we wanted to animate first. Sorry, trial and error. So this is usually my process when animating stuff. Perfect. Okay. Next up, when animating, don't leave it at the default animation setting, always use the easing settings. So I'm a fan of ease both, and that's smoother when you animate it in CSS. So let's try that. All right, smoother animation. So when we go back to our original design, it's in the default state. Our main navigation is in the default state. Now for the hero section, what should we main navigation. Now for the hero section, pretty straightforward again. So create a component, ungroup this, duplicate. Okay. Then for this first frame, we don't want the hero 2 to appear, so let's make it 0%, as well as the hero text to 0%. For here, we want the hero text 1 to disappear and slightly move down. We want it to slightly move down the screen. Okay. The Panamera text should also be down there. So we have that slightly moving up animation when users hover. So okay, what's missing here is the carousel, or the carousel buttons actually. So let's create a circle. Okay. What color should we use? Let's just use this color. Let's make it brighter. All right. A lot of these things are just impromptu, guys. Sorry. All right. So let's make the other button white. All right. Does that look good? No, it looks too big. Let's make it 24. Perfect. Okay. Now let's transfer these two buttons to here. But this time, this one is the red button and this one is the white button. Perfect. So what's going to happen here is when I click on the white button, it's going to animate here. And when I click on the white button on this state, it's going to animate back to the previous state. All right. As you can see, the alignment is totally off. The Panamera is way back there. So we need both of the x-axis to be the same. So hero text 1 is 453. Panamera should be 453 also. 453. Oh no. Sorry. 177. So hero text 2 is 177 too. 177. And here on the next screen, it's also 177. Perfect. But the animations are quite fast. We don't want users to be distracted by the very quick animation. So I set animations usually to around 0.5 seconds. And let's use the ease both. For the second set, same 0.5 and ease both. And what's great about Principle is that when you begin using 0.5, for example, and ease both for your animations, future interactions that you're going to add to this component are going to have or are going to use those animation settings. So there's no need for you to apply ease both and the 0.5 seconds for everything here. So let's try that. It's better. Super nice. All right, that's it for our hero image. For this next one, what did I want here? Okay, so this is a bigger interaction. So I'm going to animate this later when we're animating the page itself. This one is quite challenging, to be honest. Okay, so let's start. Create component. Okay, so for this one, all right, we don't want this entire thing to be a component. Okay, so sorry. So what I want to be a component only is this section. I only need to focus on this section here, because this content is not going to change when the cars here are switching. So this is going to be static content. This is going to be the animating content. So there's no need for me to make this entire section a component. Okay, so I'm going to select the two cars, and all right, there's another mistake here. I only have the cool highlights. So let's go back to Figma. There. So you see, when you have things really organized, you know where to go when you have something missing, and you know what to find. You don't need to reorganize your files anymore. So here I know that I should be looking for the Cayenne highlights. Delete everything else that I don't need. Select this frame. Go back to Principle, File, Import from Figma, and import selected frames. So that's the advantage of having those super organized layers in Figma. When you have something missing, when you want to add another thing here, it's going to be very lightning fast. Okay, so you notice that what happened here? I imported something that's 1280 by 720 pixels tall. So that's why my current layer or my current page in Figma or in Principle was also adjusted. Okay, so I don't want this to happen. Okay, so I'll just cut the layer that I need here, delete this page, and restore this page to its previous height to show the next sections. All right, perfect. And go back here. All right. Okay, so I have my Cayenne highlights. I have my Ku highlights. I have my Cayenne and the Ku car. So let's move it a bit here. I also need this button. I also need that. Thank you. Okay, so let's group this and make this a component. Make it slightly taller and add that carousel thingy that we took from the hero section. Thank you. All right, so what's our default car? FCAR2. FCAR2 should be hidden. Okay, and FCAR1 here should be hidden. Let's have a preview. Oh no. Let's have a preview. Okay. Okay, perfect. So FCAR2, as this disappears, you want it to animate slowly towards the left. Okay, so we don't want it to immediately disappear. Okay, so tap this, it goes here, and here they should be switched. Okay, and when they tap this, it's going to go back to the previous state. Okay. Okay. Now the FCAR2 should also be coming from the left side, from here. Perfect. All right. So they're kind of switching from the left, right? And again, see what Principle did here. It used the ease both and 0.5 seconds by default for things that I already copied. So ease both, same thing here. Select everything and ease both. Okay, smooth animation. All right. So the more challenging part here is actually animating this bottom, the details here at the bottom. Okay. So what do we want to happen? What do we want to happen here? So we want the cayenne. So this is the cayenne. The cayenne coup highlights should be visible. Cayenne highlights here should be invisible. Okay. Now for the cayenne coup highlights, we want the cayenne coup highlights to come from the bottom one by one when we switch from this state to this state. So we want to select them here. Let's hide the cayenne highlights first, and let's show the coup highlights. We're seeing both coup highlights at two different states, right? So we want those to be 20 pixels down the screen. And when we switch to the next state, they're going to be 20 pixels up higher in the screen. Okay. Okay. So what happens when we tap? You see? Okay. So same thing here with the cayenne highlights on the left side, on the right side, I mean. So we want them to be 20 pixels down the screen. Okay. And let's hide them again. And let's show the cool highlights. Oh no. All right. So let's try that. Oh no. Wait. Try. Okay. Now this is going to be a bit challenging. So, so here, AC1s, all of the ones should animate together, and all of the twos should animate right after the ones have animated. So let's move them here one by one. They're going to appear one after the other. For this next state, all of the AC1s are going to animate after the AC2s have animated, and they're going to animate one after the other. Also their opacity should be set. Okay, so their opacities should also be set properly. So currently, AC2s should have 0% opacity, and AC1s, sorry. Okay, yeah. Okay, so next, let's leave it for now. I'm not so sure about that animation. It's quite complicated than I expected. So for this one, what's going to happen here is this picture is going to move from the left, and this picture is going to move from the right. So that's going to be taken care of later when we're animating the entire section. For this one, this is going to be an entire section. This is going to be a component for the entire section. So this is pretty straightforward compared to the rest of the things that we did before. So what we only need here is for M slides 2 and 3 to be invisible for now. we need these things to be outside of the screen, something like that. Okay, and we want them to be slightly smaller, so around 0.8, around 0.8, their original size, and 0% opacity. Then when we duplicate this slide, this is the one that we're going to move out of the frame. We're going to make it 0.8, and we're going to make it disappear. So for this next scene, we want M slide 2 to take the stage with 1 scale and 100% opacity. And same thing we're going to do when it leaves the stage, 0.8, 0% opacity. And finally, we want slide 3 to take the stage, 100% at 1. Okay, so what's going to be the interaction here? So when they click on the arrow on the right side, right arrow, wait for this one. Why aren't you closing? Okay, so right arrow takes them here. Again, another right arrow. This right arrow, oh no. This should take them to the next slide. And this left arrow is going to take them to the previous slide. No. Okay, and the last arrow here in the previous slide. All right, let's preview this. Okay. Okay. There's an M slide 4 here. Okay, perfect. So that's it for the slide. And for this one, Principle actually has a feature for overflowing. Okay, so we just want this section to overflow. So there's a setting here on the left side where you can set the behavior of the page when there's a horizontal overflow. So we can set the horizontal overflow to scroll. Let's preview that, even though it's pretty small. No, that's not what we want to happen. So undo, let's make it static, and let's group these things together, okay? And let's make this group the one with the overflow scroll for horizontal movement, okay? Then this is where we want the scroll to happen. And let's try to preview it here. Perfect, okay? Now, I made a mistake there. The gradient should not be part of the overflowing feature. Shopping tools is okay. This is okay. All right. So the next part of this animation, probably for the next 10 minutes, will be animating the way the different elements are going to move as users scroll down the screen. All right. So what we're going to do first is we are going to make this page a lot shorter. Okay. So currently it's too tall for a web page. So it's 4,606 pixels. So let's set this to 720 pixels. Okay, so let's group everything that we want to be inside that 720 pixel scrolling screen. Okay, and let's clip all of the sublayers. So We are only going to see this, and let's make this layer scroll. So let's call this main content. Okay, and let's also set the home page height to 720. Okay, so the reason why I grouped the main content that I want to scroll inside the home page is sometimes we may want some elements to stick on the screen while users are scrolling down the home page, right? So for example, if you have an avatar button here, okay, so what's going to happen is when users scroll down, that avatar button is going to stick on the right side. Okay, so welcome to drivers. So drivers are like triggers for certain actions that users do on the prototype. So in this case, our trigger is scrolling. So we want certain things to happen when users are scrolling down the page. Okay. So first, we're okay with the home page, with the hero screen. So we want this part to animate when the user scroll down. So before it enters the screen, we want this thing here, we want this text here to be slightly below where it is now. And once it's animating up, here, we want it to move upwards. What's going to be the effect? So let's preview it here. Oh, wait, sorry. So I should add a scroll Y trigger here. So before it enters the screen, I'll add a keyframe here, basically. Then once it starts moving up, I'm going to adjust its distance or its position on the y-axis. So what's going to happen is you have that very, very slight animation going on. Enter Y, make it more obvious. There you go. Okay, so you have that sort of parallax effect when the user starts scrolling down the screen, right? Okay, so I'm going to do the same to some of the elements here, and that's going to be the end of our prototyping session. So for this state here, let's move it down a bit. Let's add that trigger for the Y scrolling. And once it reaches the top of the screen, we want it to be super high up here. How does it look? There you go. So you have a 3D effect there, parallax effect. So for this sections, let's start where it's supposed to enter the screen. Okay, move it to the right side, to the left side. Adjust its opacity. Okay, and adjust its opacity also. Make it transparent. And once it reaches the middle, or once the users reach the middle of the screen, it should end where we want it to be, which is here. And the opacity should also be, oh, sorry, this should be X. Opacity should be 0, 100. This should be X. Center X. Center X. See that? All right. It's the same with this next section. Okay. So let's add an X axis tracker as well as opacity. Adjust the opacities to 0. And move it to the left, up to the right. Then once we scroll up, We want it to be here, and we want the opacity to be at 100%. What else? Okay. This is okay. Okay. I think we have everything that we needed to prototype. Okay, so what's the result of our prototype? Okay, so from the home screen, from the hero image, what did we do here? We added another state for the navigation, right? So when users hover on the nav screen, they're going to see this. Okay, awesome. Okay, and when they tap on these buttons here, the hero image is going to animate. Okay, and when they start scrolling down, bits and pieces of the UI start scrolling up or start moving up as if they're on 3D space. Okay, the buttons are also working. Okay, and now this is not perfect. I'm so sorry for this. This is going to take a lot. This is going to take longer than expected, but you get the point. Scrolling down, more animations that are triggered by the user's scroll. So from 0% opacity, the images from the left and from the right are animating towards the center where we want them to be once the users reach that part of the screen. And for the milestones, we have the carousel. And for this part here, we have the overflowing section. That's really useful when we want to feature a lot of elements on one row and the rest of the sections. Now, I forgot to animate something actually. This effect is cool, but I forgot to put it here. So let me just go back for a bit. Now, the thing about drivers in Principle is they kind of act like timelines within for your page when you're scrolling. So if you're seeing this section of your website or your design, you may need to go back to the zero timeline, to the zero spot on the timeline here, in order for you to see the things at the top of your screen. Okay, so what we want here is we want this to be scrolling. We want this to end here, somewhere there. Okay, and for this group, I'll clip the sublayers and I'll add a horizontal scrolling effect. Okay, so as you can see, there you go. Not perfect, wait. There you go. Okay, so that was easy. And going back to the parent, let's save the file, show it in preview, and there you have it. A side-scrolling drop-down navigation for our car models. Okay, that's it. Do you guys have any questions? Yeah, that's the workflow that you'd want to implement when going from and animating in Principle from Figma. So just a recap on what I've discussed so far, right? Number one, when you are designing in Figma, or when you are preparing your prototypes in Figma, separate your prototype or separate the files that you want to prototype in a different page, in a separate page inside Figma. So the reason why is you're going to break a lot of your layouts, you're going to prepare a lot of states, you're going to detach a lot of components from their masters. So you don't want to mess with your design library. So you want everything to be separated from your actual designs. Number two is you need to identify the main scenes of your prototype. So for every section, identify what the different states are. Identify what types of content are you going to show here when a user clicks on a specific button or a navigation, or what if it slides to the left or right. Okay. Next is identify the different interactions that you want for your components. Okay, so prepare your files with these animations in mind. Flatten all of the layers that you don't want or you don't need to animate. Rename all of the layers so that the layer organization is cleaner and you don't get confused once you're inside Principle. So flatten everything that you don't need animated, or everything, all of the components that have elements inside that you don't want animated. Prepare states as well. All of your buttons, all of your navigations, prepare all of the states as well as for the carousels and the bigger components, and use as little nesting as possible. As you have seen earlier in my workflow, it was relatively easy for me to spot what I needed to fix because I had at most 3 levels or 2 levels of nesting in my layers. Okay. And once you're in Principle, um, once you've got all of those things organized in Figma, once you're in Principle, it's very easy for you to spot things or to identify all of those elements that you need to animate. So what do you need to animate first? Number one, start with the smallest components. Start with the buttons, start with the navigation, start with the little interactions that you want for your carousels. Next, focus on the animations for the bigger sections. So these are the carousels, these are the sliders, these are the bigger sections basically of your layout. And lastly, you'd want to reserve the biggest animation, which is the page animations last. Okay, because once you have the driver set for your page, for example, it's pretty difficult to go down to the rest of the sections of your website to animate the little components there. All right, so approach it as you would approach designing with atomic design in mind. So components first, sections, then pages. All right, so that's it. That's our workflow so far for animating using Figma and Principles. The floor is open for questions.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you folks hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
Jobs.
Okay, so just a immediate question. So, is it possible to do the flattening on Principle instead, or why do you prefer flattening on Figma versus like moving into Principle? Yeah.
I prefer flattening my layers inside Figma because once I get into Principle, I want to start animating immediately. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty details of reorganizing my files. Because it's a lot easier to rename stuff in Figma. It's a lot easier to find layers that you need in Figma. So as much as possible, organize and flatten all of the layers that you need in Figma. Once in Principle, my mindset is for animating already.
Okay. Next
Yeah.
question. What if you've done already? What's your workflow with redoing an animation inside? The specific question is, what if you've already done some animations to your file?
Mm-hmm.
You have to change like the whole section. So what's like the workflow that's gonna happen in your head?
Okay. So. mm,
Yeah. So for example,
this
that
navigation, right?
that hero or navigation. So what if you came from Figma? There's a huge change that, for example, a client wants to give, or a client wants to happen. So how does that workflow happen? Yeah.
All right. Okay. So that's pretty easy, and I think I've shown that earlier. So what I usually do is go inside this component, identify what group this is in Figma. So this is the main navigation group, right? So I'll go back to Figma and spot that group, duplicate it outside of the file. And for example, for some weird reason, the client wants the utility bar to be dark. So let's use red color, right? Not that red, or something like that. Then he wants the text white and bold. Okay. So I only need to import this thing here. I remove everything else that I don't need. Make sure that this bar is flattened. Select it, go back here, import from Figma, import selected frames, one image. So it's just one image. And copy that layer to on top of this one. Delete the previous layer. Okay. Now, Figma has a feature that automatically detects layers that are already imported inside the page. So we'll try that. I don't use it. I'm not a fan of it, but it works sometimes. So what I mean is, for example, here. For example, I want to change just this layout here, or let's say for some weird reason also client wants this drop down to be a darker gray. All right. So if you've changed a lot of layers in your file, Principle, I think, allows you to replace them once you've imported them in Figma. So I've changed the color of this background. I've changed the color of the background of the drop down. So let's see what happens if I import this entire section to this component. So file, import from Figma, import selected frames. What's going to happen here? Oh no. This is why I don't trust that technique. But there was a way for example, if this entire page belongs to one file, for example, this file or this frame, Figma is Principle is automatically going to detect what changed in the layers here, and it will just replace everything that you've done here so far, as long as they're not inside components. So it's tricky. It gets kind of tricky if you miss something, if you miss editing something from Figma. But that's my workaround. Just import that specific element.
That's a bit hard, no? Once you finalize an element, like moving into Principle. Yeah. So those questions were from Iya and Adewali or Adewale. Hopefully I didn't pronounce. Hopefully I didn't butcher the pronunciation. So a couple of more questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
It's possible to record in Principle, diba? I think we've done that. Record the
Yes.
animation in Principle. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So just you only need to view the preview here. Can you see this? And it has this little video icon here at the top. When you press that, it's going to start recording. Okay. Then when you stop. So it allows you to choose the format of your recording, either video, GIF, or ProRes. Then for the arrow or for the cursor, you can choose from touch, arrow, or none. You can also set the size. And what's good about this is it actually has a setting for dribble. So if you want to share your animation on dribble, it's very easy for you to do so. Yeah, that's how you share or record and share videos of your prototypes in Principle. Something that's very tricky when
Actually, the next question.
Yeah.
Sorry. Follow-up questions. Can record it already, right? So how do you share that to clients? What's the process?
We send them we send them the video. We just send them the video. That's usually the recording is a last resort for us. As much as possible, when we present these prototypes, when we want to show these prototypes to clients, we do so in an actual presentation because we want them to experience how it is to move around the website or move around the design. When back when we back when we were still able to meet clients face to face, so we used to have them interact with the prototype using our laptops, and even the mobile phones. Yeah, and
So
actually, Principle has a mirror. If you can see here, it has a mirror feature for your device, for your iOS, and it acts pretty much the same as the one for Figma. Yeah.
a couple of more questions.
Sure.
So what's your current workflow right now with sharing Principle and translating that to code? So it's been a while since I last worked with you, and what's like the process now with sharing those to the developers in the team for switching translating it to code? What's the workflow, so to speak?
To be honest, there's no easy way to translate the animations here to code. It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier when you're using Framer, but that's a different topic. Framer is a totally different beast. For Principle, it's pretty hard. That's what I could say. Whenever I hand over animations to developers, I need to keep track of these things here. All right, these animation settings. So, but it usually it's just one or two lines of CSS, right? So you only need to identify the starting point, what's changing, the opacity. So that's one. So from 0% opacity to 100% opacity, take note of that. Take note of the CSS. Then what's the animation speed? So currently it's at 0.3 seconds. So that's that. And the animation type. So is it default, a linear animation, or the ones with easing? Okay. So these are the things that I only share to developers so far. I haven't encountered sharing super complex animations to developers. Usually, when we do that, we just give them pegs of the websites that we want to copy instead of giving them individual animations or animation settings from Principle. But depending on the type of team that you're working with, there are pretty talented developers, front-end developers out there that whenever you show them these animations, they automatically get what type of animation they want. They're going to set in CSS, so they know that it's 0.5 seconds or it's ease in, ease out. They have this very good eye to detail when it comes to animation. So when you're working with developers like that, it's pretty awesome. But for others, you, yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, but for most of our workflow, we tend to work closely with some developers and just share the CSS ourselves, just to make sure that the animations are done correctly, the timings, everything, especially if it's slightly complicated.
So cool. Thanks for the question, Paul and Amara from the recording question a while. Question, if you don't mind. So how different is the experience? Is the prototyping experience if you're prototyping mobile screens and you need to switch from one screen to the next, asked by Red. So like the mentality when it comes to prototyping something on mobile, is it the same as something that you would do with web? Hope I asked it right.
So are we talking about the transitions here from one page to the next? From one page to another?
I think overall prototyping yeah. If you're like prototyping mobile screens, is the
Yeah,
mentality this?
the mentality is quite the same. There's just this added layer of interaction thinking when you're prototyping mobile screens, because you need to have you need to specify more transitions when you're transitioning from one screen to another, right? That's what usually happens when you're using mobile. So for example, when you tap on one item on your navigation and it's going to take the user to the next screen, how is the transition going to be? Is the screen going to slide from the left to the right? Or are the images going to be transparent? Is the previous page going to be darkened a bit, and the next page going to be going to slide over that previous page? So you have those animations to keep in mind when you're transitioning, or when you're thinking of transitions between mobile app screens. When when we're designing websites, usually the transitions from between pages are pretty straightforward. You just switch from one page to the next, unless you're designing highly interactive web page or web design, where when a user clicks on a navigation item, for example, everything else on the page fades out, and it's going to be replaced by the elements of the next page. So if you're designing something like that, I think the challenge is going to be on the same level as designing transitions for mobile apps.
All right. There was a question earlier. I'll just go back to it. Baka may insight ka. Um, is there a reason for preferring 0% transparency rather than hiding the layer?
Oh, hiding the layer is not, hidden layers are not animated. You can't animate hidden layers. So for example, if in the first state, the layer is hidden, and in the second state, the layer is, you switch the layer on to be visible, the transition is going to be, there's no, basically there's no transition between those two states, because on and off layer settings are not animated. So you need the opacity to be set for to 0 and 100% for something to be animated from invisible to visible.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. And then
Right.
there was also a question about the timeline. Can you just show us how you brought that up? Because
Oh,
we couldn't see.
okay. Let's make something. Okay. So when you go inside the component, you're going to see different arrows here on the top of the screens. So these arrows indicate the direction of the interactions when you trigger something on the first state, or when you trigger something on the second state. When you click on these arrows, you're going to see all of the animated properties. Okay, so in this case, this is basically telling me that when I hover on this state, as I go to the second state, the opacity is going to be animated from 0% to 100%. Okay, so from 0 to 100%. And this is where we adjust the timelines as well. Okay, so you just extend it, set the animation type. Okay, so if you want to set the animation or see the timeline for the reverse interaction, just select the next arrow here at the top. Okay, so all of the interactions are here in the arrows.
Cool. I think this was a question asked a while ago. Please tell me if what is asked already. But there's a question: are we limited to two states? So, for example, two states from one interaction to another.
No, we're not
It's
limited.
limited to two states. Yeah,
We're
yeah.
not limited to
I think
two
I
states. We
think
can add more.
yeah. I think
Add
I
more.
answered it wrong a while ago. Yeah. So anyway, I'll leave the answer to you. Sorry.
Yeah, we can add as many states as we want here. So, for example, when we hover, the learn more is going to the second state is going to appear, right? So, for some weird reason, I want to add a third state where this entire section moves down a bit. Okay. Okay. So when I click this, tap, it goes here. Okay. So hover, tap, got it. So
Yes.
currently we're on the second state. When I tap it, third state. When I hover out, goes back to first state. Yeah, so we're not limited. You can add as many states as you want.
Yeah. I was assuming to if you tap once, go to another, tap once, go to another. I apologize for that, John Daniel. So that was the answer to the question. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Do we have any more questions, guys? Like so Anjo, Chi, Paul, Eric, were there any more questions that were asked?
I think everything else was either answered by you or have been covered so far. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Yes. Probably one or two questions before we cap off the night. So yeah. Anyone else would like
It's
to clarify
actually
anything?
also 9 p.m. already. How long did it take you to learn Principle? Monica Soliman asks. Yeah, what's the learning curve? Looks like it's a bit complicated.
The learning curve of Principle. Actually, Principle is a lot easier than Figma, to be honest. To be
Oh,
perfectly honest, it's a lot easier than Figma. Yeah, you can learn it overnight. You can learn it overnight. I never had like a one week or 3 days dedicated to just learning Principle. I just applied it to a project way back in 2018. So because I felt the need to have richer interactions, richer animations for a presentation. So I just went ahead and used Principle, and you can learn it overnight.
It's awesome. It's awesome. And
yeah.
it's the same experience as well when I was working with you. It's a pretty easy transition. So yeah. Any other
Yeah.
questions? Oh yeah.
There is another question.
Yeah.
Adewale.
Adewale.
Can you add an animation effect while you are in the timeline on the same state? I think you can, right? Like, since it's based on keyframes, or no. Can you add an animation effect while you're in the timeline on the same state?
The better question is, can you add multiple properties in each animation? So for example, we're manipulating the X and Y, right? So is it possible to add more changes?
Yeah. Yeah. Here's something very basic. So for example, I have a square here. Then in the next state, I want this to be here on the right side, and I want it to be this big and rotate 45 degrees. So tap, when I tap this next state, boom. Yeah, so you can animate a lot of properties at the same time.
Amazing.
Cool.
Did that answer your question, Adam?
Yes, it was multiple properties. Yeah. Multiple
Mhm.
properties.
You can even adjust the color. So let's try that. Boom. So it reminds me of Flash, actually. That's why it was pretty easy for me to use Principle, because it felt easier actually than Flash.
Oh, really?
Oh my god, that says so much about my age.
Oh god.
Flash days. Oh god.
Yes,
Sorry.
Flash days. Anyone here not familiar with Flash?
Into that, yeah. Flash.
Macromedia Flash.
People here are not.
Macromedia
Oh
Flash.
my god.
Yeah, this is easier than Flash, to be honest.
Yeah,
Speaks a lot. Yeah.
yeah. We've come a long way.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh days.
Okay, anyway,
So that was pretty awesome.
action working right. So expect a better animation for this section. It was a lot complicated than I expected it to be. All right, so yeah, that's it. Thanks everyone for staying up this late with us. Jobs, take it
Yeah.
away.
Thanks, Nico.
Yes. Cool. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, especially Nico, for spending your like that. That was a cool session, and hopefully, those who will be rewatching this would be like would be helpful for them. So huge shout out to Nico for accepting. Nico is actually part of Figma Philippines, by the way. So yeah, it was
Friends of
pretty
Philippines.
friends of Figma Philippines. I keep stumbling upon that. I'm sorry. Yeah. So before we cap things off, I just want to thank everyone. Hopefully, this was a good way to cap off your weekend, or for those who are not here in the Philippines, like hopefully this is a good like break to whatever routine that you're having on your side of a planet. So just want to share some last minute links. So for our group specifically in Friends of Figma Philippines, we have a Facebook group. Just search for Friends of Figma Philippines. If you want to interact with the people who are there, all of us, I think all of us are there. So just please go ahead and join. There are other people from other countries as well who are also there. So please do interact with the community. We also have a Friends of Figma Facebook page where we post our announcements, especially we'll be boosting our engagement with the community. So go ahead and like the Facebook page as well. And if you guys want, follow us on Twitter, which is FOF_Philippines. And yeah, see you guys all there. Hopefully, we can interact more. If you have any feedback, please go ahead and share your feedback to the Facebook group, or you can actually interact with any one of us and just share whatever your thoughts about the format. Because Figma Fridays is just all about very sharing of things that the speaker is willing to share, and we're very thankful for that. And yeah, hopefully you have a great weekend ahead. For us in the Philippines, we're technically in the long weekend. So if you're just starting your weekend, then hopefully it was a fruitful Friday for you folks. And yeah, nainggit na sa chips. I'm sorry. So yeah, so yeah, cool. People are sharing last minute links on the chat. So huge thanks for that. So that I think caps off this edition of Figma Fridays from Friends of Figma Philippines, and I hope we'll see you guys next time. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Jelvin. Thank you, Nico. G. Angel.